Yoshiharu is an ordinary high school boy who is sent back in time to the Sengoku period, with nothing more than a low-battery smartphone. And despite people constantly trying to kill him, Yoshiharu quickly puts his knowledge of Japanese history to use by making himself rich, creating a harem of warrior beauties, and even leading an army through war. But all this begins when Yoshiharu first arrives in feudal Japan and is saved by Toyotomi Hideyoshi, the man destined to unify Japan after Oda Nobunaga. With the death of such an important historical figure, Yoshiharu realizes that all of Japanese history is about to change, and he has no choice but to take Hideyoshi's place in history. Moments later, however, Yoshiharu is awestruck by a samurai babe, slashing her way through the battlefield. But when her sword breaks, Yoshiharu leaps into her defense. By playing war sound effects on his smartphone, he makes the men believe that he is some kind of sorcerer, with an entire army in his tiny magical box. This plan works for a few seconds, until his phone's battery dies, and he's forced to protect the girl with his body. Thankfully, reinforcements soon arrive to rescue them, and the girl kicks Yoshiharu off of her, before revealing that she is Oda Nobuna, the female version of Oda Nobunaga, the man revered as Japan's first great unifier. It's then that Yoshiharu realizes that in this alternate timeline, many of the well-known historical Japanese figures are now female. As a reward for saving her, Oda spares Yoshiharu's life and allows him to become her servant. But when he introduces himself, Oda mishears his name and calls him Saru, which means monkey in Japanese. Yoshiharu then tries to explain to the group that he's actually from the future, but of course no one believes a time-traveling monkey. And with his phone now out of battery, he doesn't have many ways of proving his claims. Inuchiyo, one of Oda's strongest soldiers and someone who also looks exactly like her real-life counterpart, takes Yoshiharu to his new house, which he hates. Suddenly, they are ambushed, and Yoshiharu is kidnapped by Goemon, a cute lolly ninja who stutters and bites her tongue whenever she speaks for too long. But rather than attack Yoshiharu, she promises to protect him and pledges her life to him. The next day, while having a meeting with Oda, Yoshiharu uses his knowledge of Japanese history to prove that he's from the future, by predicting that Oda will have an important meeting with Dosan, the leader of the province of Mino. Moments later, a messenger from Mino arrives on behalf of Dosan to request a meeting. Oda is impressed that Yoshiharu's prediction came true, but she still doesn't believe he's actually from the future. Once at the meeting location, Oda reveals to have changed into noble attire, catching both Dosan and Yoshiharu off guard. But beyond her beautiful allure is a ruthless leader who tells Dosan that she doesn't just want to conquer Japan, she wants to conquer the entire world. Dosan is surprised by Oda's relentless ambition, as he desires the same. Yoshiharu then suddenly interrupts their conversation to tell them that they should work together towards this shared dream rather than wage war. He manages to convince Dosan that he is from the future by revealing that he knows exactly what his plans are and that an alliance is the only way to stop unnecessary bloodshed. Surprisingly, Dosan agrees with Yoshiharu and decides to entrust Oda as the new heir to the Mino province. Unfortunately, this decision angers Yoshitatsu, Dosan's son, who begins to plot a rebellion against his father. As time passes, Yoshiharu seems to be getting more comfortable with his new life and new friends, but their fun is cut short when Oda requests to meet with him. In order to prove his worth, Oda gives Yoshiharu $3,000 and challenges him to find a way to get $6,000 worth of rice with this money. If he fails this challenge, he will lose his head to Nobukatsu, Oda's younger brother, who hates Yoshiharu and threatens to rebel against his sister if he is allowed to live. This would be a daunting challenge for most, but by using his video game knowledge, Yoshiharu is easily able to turn $3,000 into $30,000 in only 1 week, with the help of Inuchiyo and Goemon, who have grown quite fond of Yoshiharu. Unfortunately, he got so caught up in making money that he forgot to buy the rice. He tasks his 2 lolly companions with buying the rice while he tries to buy some time with Oda. And while they wait for Inuchiyo and Goemon to report back, Oda confides in Yoshiharu that she wants to see the whole world, and that she believes it isn't actually flat. Yoshiharu of course agrees with her and tells her even more about the world outside Japan. And for the first time in her life, Oda feels as though someone finally understands her. But since the deadline for the challenge has passed, Oda has no choice but to take Yoshiharu's head. Thankfully, Goemon arrives moments later with the rice, and Yoshiharu is spared. Despite this, Oda's younger brother decides to rebel against Oda anyways, at the guidance of his advisors, who want to see him lead rather than Oda. Not wanting things to escalate further, Yoshiharu manages to subdue the rebellion peacefully by using the troops to intimidate Nobukatsu into surrendering. However, because of his betrayal, Oda must make an example out of her younger brother by executing him. Yoshiharu, fearing that Oda will become as cold and ruthless as the real Nobunaga, convinces her to spare her younger brother. A grateful Nobukatsu then strips himself of his family name and pledges his loyalty to Oda as a subordinate. After all is said and done, Oda thanks Yoshiharu for his guidance as he pledges his undying loyalty to her. Sometime later, Dosan and his friends are all forcibly exiled out of Mino because of a rebellion against them. But on their way to Oda, they are ambushed by rebels led by Yoshitatsu, Dosan's son, and are quickly losing the fight. Upon hearing of this assault, Oda wants to send troops to help Dosan, but she knows that she can't do that, otherwise neighboring hostile provinces will invade her. Understanding how important Dosan is to her, Yoshiharu, Goemon, and a group of men weirdly attached to Goemon all embark on a very dangerous mission to rescue Dosan. They eventually manage to barely rescue him, but are still being pursued while attempting to escape. As waves of fire arrows rain upon them, Yoshiharu realizes that by saving Dosan, he has altered history since Dosan actually died to his son in real life. And as the enemy's cavalry closes in on them, impending doom seems certain. But suddenly, Oda arrives with her forces and saves the day. Yoshiharu then lectures Oda on how stupid it was to come save them, but she slaps him and says that he's the stupid one for leaving her all alone. Moments later, a messenger arrives to inform them that Imagawa, a neighboring hostile province, has started invading their territory with 25,000 troops, heavily outnumbering Oda's 3,000 troops. In actual history, this is known as the Battle of Okehazama, and is a battle won by Oda Nobunaga in June 1560, despite having significantly less troops. Unaware of this fact, however, Oda is unsure how they're supposed to win when the odds are stacked so highly against them. Yoshiharu, on the other hand, knows that victory can be achieved if he can recreate the strategies employed by the real Nobunaga. As such, Yoshiharu and his friends head out towards Okehazama, which he remembers as the location of the enemy leader's camp. On their way there, they surprisingly run into Nobukatsu and his harem of warrior babes, who are completely enamored with him. Yoshiharu convinces Nobukatsu to distract the enemy troops with his girls, while he and his two lollies report back to Oda. On their way back, however, Inuchiyo and Goemon are ambushed by ninjas and are forced to fend them off. Meanwhile, Yoshiharu continues on ahead, only to be attacked by Hattori Hanzo, who severely wounds him. But by using some talk no jutsu, Yoshiharu manages to convince Hanzo to spare his life. After reaching Oda and informing her of the location of the enemy leader's camp, Oda prepares her army for war with a powerful speech. And as it begins to rain, Yoshiharu notes that it rained during the real Oda Nobunaga's victory too. Oda arrives to Okehazama and launches a full frontal assault onto the Imagawa clan. Oda's warrior babes slash their way through the enemy forces, as Yoshiharu's two cute pet lollies also work together to kick some ass. Meanwhile, Yoshimoto Imagawa, the enemy leader and another character who looks identical to their real-life counterpart, is soon met by Yoshiharu, who convinces her to surrender, granting Oda the victory against all odds. Despite winning the war, however, Oda lectures Yoshiharu for once again making dangerous plans on his own, without informing her first. A few days after their victory, Yoshiharu asks Oda to compensate him for his efforts in the war by letting him go on a date with the most beautiful maiden in the land, which he thinks is Yoshimoto Imagawa. Oda calls him a perverted monkey as she believes he is referring to her, but still agrees to someday fulfill his wish. Sometime later, Oda has a meeting to discuss retaking control of the Mino province, as it is still controlled by Dosan's son and his rebels. However, they fear that invading Mino is impossible due to Takenaka Hanbei, a famous tactician that has laid traps all around Mino. Later that day, while Yoshiharu feeds his pet lolly, he runs into Akechi Mitsuhide, the person historically destined to one day betray and kill Oda Nobunaga, although they look slightly different in our history. Yoshiharu and Akechi decide to sneak into Mino and visit Hanbei in person, in hopes of bringing the famed tactician over to their side. Once there, however, they run into Nagamasa, the leader of another province that also seeks to partner with Hanbei. While the two men argue, Hanbei suddenly appears and transforms into a wolf right before their eyes. As lightning fills the room, Yoshiharu, Akechi, and Nagamasa find themselves equally shocked, but Inuchiyo calmly walks up to the wolf and stabs it, seemingly killing it. Inuchiyo then opens a trap door and reveals the real Hanbei hiding behind it, which turns out to be a shy lolly who's incredibly adept at performing illusions. After conversing with her, Yoshiharu begins to understand Hanbei's pure heart well, and manages to convince her to join their side by promising that Oda will unify Japan and put an end to all this unnecessary bloodshed. Later that night, however, Hanbei, who is impressed by Yoshiharu's kindness, clarifies that she will only serve him and fulfill his wishes rather than Oda's. The next day, Oda is surprised that the famous tactician is just a little girl, but she happily welcomes her to the team regardless. They then discuss their plans to invade Mino and siege Ichiya Castle where Yoshitatsu resides, but doing so is nearly impossible because the castle sits at the top of a mountain, and they must also cross a heavily guarded river to even get there. Thanks to his knowledge of history, however, Yoshiharu knows exactly how to siege this castle, and Oda finally trusts him and agrees to leave it up to him. As part of his plan, Yoshiharu sends Oda and her army as decoys to lure out some of Yoshitatsu's troops. Meanwhile, Yoshiharu orders his men to gather wood and assemble walls so they can build a fort across from Ichiya Castle in just one night without being spotted by enemy forces. At that same time, Yoshitatsu's generals lure Oda's forces to a valley. Unbeknownst to them, however, Yoshitatsu has rigged the valley with explosives in hopes of killing Oda, even at the cost of his own generals. Oda, however, manages to escape this fiery death trap, along with Yoshitatsu's forces, who decide to join her after feeling betrayed that Yoshitatsu used them as bait. The next day, Yoshitatsu is shocked to see that a tactical fort has appeared from across the river, with Oda's troops ready to defend it. As he realizes that Oda was only a distraction all along, an angered Yoshitatsu sends his troops charging towards the fort. Yoshiharu and friends thankfully hold their own for a while, and try to buy time for Oda to arrive with reinforcements. Unfortunately, the fort won't last much longer as enemy forces have begun to penetrate its defenses. An enemy soldier shoots at Yoshiharu, but Goemon valiantly intercepts and blocks it with her body. As the men continue to fight for their lives, Yoshiharu holds Goemon in his arms and begs for her not to die on him. Not wanting her death to be for nothing, Yoshiharu solidifies his resolve to win this fight no matter what. Oda then arrives moments later, only to see the fort in flames. She falls to her knees and cries as she believes she arrived too late to help them. But just as all seemed lost, she notices Yoshiharu in the distance waving at her, and a relieved Oda orders her army to charge ahead. Goemon suddenly jolts back up and reveals that she was obviously wearing protective gear. Yoshiharu is overjoyed to learn that she survived, and embraces her tightly, which embarrasses Goemon, but pisses off her loyal followers. Meanwhile, it's revealed that Nagamasa planned to use this opportunity to invade Mino as well, but Yoshiharu had anticipated this and stationed a samurai babe to intercept Nagamasa, foiling his sneaky plans. After winning the battle, Oda seizes control of Ichiya Castle and of the Mino province, and decides to spare Yoshitatsu's life as she wishes to be a kind leader. But as Yoshitatsu leaves, he swears that he will someday have his revenge. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all again in the next video.